Unwanted Reviews, and today it is December 15th, and we open that 15th door of our 2020 Advent Calendar of Christmas horror movies, this time taking a look at the 1972 movie, Whoever Slew Auntie Roo.
Oh, God, that title. Whoa.
I gotta be honest, every year I compile a list of Christmas horror movies, and I just kind of, mark them off as I go along. And this one has been staring me in the face for 2 years running now. It's not like it's this hidden little tiny movie about an axe murderer that was only shown in 2 screens. This was a pretty big deal. It's just the title. I've never been able to get around the title. And you know what? This time I said, fine. 3rd year running, I'm finally going to review Whoever Slew Auntie Roo. And it's not like I've had a whole lot of motivation to do it, honestly. I love the classics. I just covered a 1945 movie yesterday. But classics, by and large, really suffer on the analytics. Nobody really seems to be too awful interested in reviews of the classics, and I think it's a shame, and I still am going to be doing reviews of them. I still think that they are worth talking about, bringing up, and at least seeing if they're worthwhile and stand up today. So, Whoever Slew Auntie Roo, went ahead and watched it, and not too bad. Certainly better than the title at any rate. This movie was directed by Curtis Harrington and written by David Osborne and Robert Blees. And we kind of start out with getting introduced to Auntie Roo, or rather Mrs. Forrest as her actual name is, played by the iconic Shelley Winters. And she is holding a seance and trying to connect with a young girl, her daughter, who has passed on, and she is hearing the voice of her daughter try to make contact with her. They're not able to really have a big communication party here, but they can hear each other, and the seance ends. Then we get whisked away to an orphanage where we are introduced to the characters of Christopher and Katie. Played by Mark Lester and Chloe Franks respectively, they are brother and sister in this orphanage having been abandoned, and they have some trouble fitting in. Christopher especially is known for telling tales and getting immersed in books, which some of his headmasters see as a problem. But regardless, his imagination runs wild. He tells these stories. He scares the little kids and so forth. So, the imagination thing is a good thing. The reading is a good thing. Little scary little kids, maybe not quite so much. But regardless, they are a little bit outcast. And so how does this all tie in together? Well, you see, Mrs. Forrest holds a get-together, a dinner, and a special sleepover kind of activity thing, and a Christmas tree and presents, really doing it up Christmas style for a select group of orphans that have been on their best behavior. Christopher and Katie, not quite cutting it in that regard, but they stow away anyway, and they surprise everybody by showing up at the party, and to her credit, Mrs. Forrest, or Auntie Roo as she likes the children to call her, is delighted anyway. And she takes them in, she feeds them, she hands the presents and so on and so forth. And the whole thing is just really festive and selfless and delightful. Until it's not. You see, Katie winds up reminding Auntie Roo of her late daughter, and she starts to kind of wonder if she would like to live with them and so on and so forth. Christopher's a little apprehensive. The whole thing shrieks of one of the books that he read, Hansel and Gretel. And but there's a little bit of a thing there. And when the kids, it's time to go, she actually holds Katie captive. And Christopher has to try and help her escape and so on and so forth. If you can already see the major leap of logic in the storyline that kind of puts a big question mark in your head, you're not alone. It was definitely front and center for me too. Namely, we have this insanely wealthy benefactor and friend of the orphanage who takes a liking to some orphans and wants to take them into her home and have them live with her. I wonder how that could happen. It's a little bit of a boggle. I know, I'll fucking kidnap them. Regardless, moving past that, because in order to enjoy this movie, you really do have to move past that. Just accept that it is. She doesn't quite have everything all together, so sound reasoning is not really on the table. Nevertheless, that big gaping plot hole aside, I did find this movie to be charming and quaint and fun in its own way. It was compelling enough that I actually was entertained all the way through, and I think this would be a really good contender for one of those family-friendly horror movies. It's not exactly little kid-friendly. It does have some gruesome skeleton-esque kind of things. Really no worse than you'd see in like Psycho, but that ilk. But that's about as far as it goes in terms of violence or blood and gore and so on and so forth, or even scares. Really, this is just kind of the story of a woman that is not really dealing with a full deck of cards, introducing herself to a situation that extends her mental capabilities beyond their breaking point with these kids in her house. And that might be a little bit tough in terms of little kids just trying to kind of understand the narrative. Why is Auntie Roo doing this to Christopher and Katie? It's a little tough to explain that kind of void of the loss of a child and how reality might get skewed in the face of that when you're trying to fill that void in unhealthy ways. Even so, this did provide an interesting and slightly skewed version of Hansel and Gretel as they wind up living the story that Christopher is so fearful of. I do think this movie would have fallen apart completely if it hadn't been for the performances of the child actors. It's a pretty big risk in horror movies as far as casting children, not necessarily in the subject matter and so forth, but really just how irritating they are going to be to the audiences. And in this case, I would say not at all. They were charming, they were intelligent, I was on board with them through and through, and I thought that they provided a really interesting foil to Auntie Roo. Mark Lester playing Christopher was especially cunning and distrusting of Auntie Roo pretty much right from the start. As soon as she started to take an unnatural interest in Katie, he saw through that right away, and he was right in line trying to protect his sister. Kudos on the performances all around in general. So would I recommend this movie? If you were in the mood for something that will absolutely scare the pants off of you, chill you to the bone, send you screaming, running for the light switch so that you can turn on the lights and make sure that nothing's actually in the shadows there, no, this is not going to scratch that itch at all. But it's very Christmassy, it's very fun, it's very festive, and I think it has a lot of classic charm to it that should work with audiences that are able to have a bit of patience and just enjoy the simplistic storytelling that the movie delivers. And on that note, yes, I would absolutely recommend the 1972, unfortunately titled movie, Whoever Slew Auntie Roo. Thank you very much for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.